Welcome to the Robotics Through Science Fiction podcast. I'm Robin Murphy, and let's talk about robot series and books. It's summer. There are long summer days, you've got vacation, you've got bosses out on vacation, so that means you might at last have some time to catch up on binge reading a series. I still remember the summer I discovered the E. Doc Smith classic pulp fiction Lensman series and plowed through all 6 of the books while soaking up rays by the pool. It's an example of why the magazine Astounding and its editor John Campbell ruled back in the day. And do check out the RTS interview with Alec Neville Ali about his book Astounding, John W. Campbell, Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, L. Ron Hubbard, and the Golden Age of Science Fiction. Great book. But anyway, since a lensman always pays his or her debts, think of this RTSF list of 11 series as payback for being a listener. And at the end, I'll give which ones have my absolute top recommendations. Isaac Asimov, The Complete Robot, where all the robot stories are above average. The Complete Robot is the classic anthology of Isaac Asimov short stories, including the robot ones that don't make use of the 3 laws. Now, while Asimov didn't create robotics, remember that was Karl Čapek's RUR, he certainly brought robots front and center into the sci-fi mainstream. The stories are amusing, thoughtful, and overall positive. There's no robot uprisings here, or at least not in the usual shoot-'em-up way. And sometimes the action is more along of a pleasant episode of Garrison Keillor's Lake Wobegon. The stories take us through his development of the 3 laws as clever plot devices, full of contradictions, and no author has written so much about the technology yet at the same time given us such memorable characters and settings. There's Susan Calvin, Powell and Donovan, Robbie the Robot, U.S. Robots and Mechanical Men, but there's a bit of awkwardness in rereading Asimov's stories. Like the gasp induced by the unacceptable antics and parenting norms in the TV series Mad Men, Asimov's earliest stories are too often an unsettling reflection of the 1950s through 1970s. The robots are commonly addressed by everyone as boy, a stark reminder of what it must have liked to have been an African American before the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. Susan Calvin fits the unflattering stereotype of a cold, isolated, unattractive woman scientist that shows up time and time again in science fiction, such as the Andromeda Strain. There's no Marie Curie, family of Nobel Prize winners, or Hedy Lamarr, I'm a pinup who also holds patents characters here. And yet, Asimov was a true humanist. Some readers think his portrayal of autism in Strangers of Paradise is offensive, but Asimov deserves credit for even thinking about it when others were trying to sweep autism under the rug. You can read 3 of his most scientifically accurate stories in my book, Robotics Through Science Fiction, Artificial Intelligence Explained Through 6 Classic Robot Short Stories. And you can also check out the Robotics Through Science Fiction podcast with Joanne Prinsky. The good doctor declared she was the real Dr. Susan Calvin because of her take on Asimov and his legacy. So speaking of Asimov, there's 2 Asimov robot franchise series, Robot City and Robots and Aliens. So just like the Star Wars franchise, Asimov and his iRobot series has inspired numerous official spin-offs. Robot City was the first officially sanctioned series. Each book is written by a different author, but the characters remain the same, so the writing kind of has a feel like that game played around a campfire when one person starts a story, the next person adds to it, the next person adds to it, and so on. Robots and Aliens considers the format but moves the action to space. And readers tend to be evenly split into 2 camps, one being that the more Asimov-like books, the better. The second, the books are pretty mediocre. I find that without the good doctor's intellect, the insights into robotics and technology are missing. Still, the summer is a great opportunity for you to determine what you think about the series for yourself. And now for something completely different. The Ware tetralogy. Software, wetware, freeware, realware. And that's where robots say, hell no. Oops, start over. And now for something completely different. The Ware tetralogy. Software, wetware, freeware, realware. It's a great series where robots say, no, hell no to Asimov's laws, but they do say yes to genetic algorithms. So, remember when Rocket Raccoon in the first Guardians of the Galaxy says, "Ain't no thing like me except me"? Now, there ain't no thing like Rudy Rucker's Ware tetralogy. Rucker, a Silicon Valley computer scientist, has put together quite the merry prankster's head trip. It's part Tim Dorsey madcap satire on the baby boomer generation in Florida, part Philip K. Dick drug culture, but if Dick was happy and optimistic, not dark, part cyberpunk manifesto, and part how technology would really work. The backstory is that Cobb Anderson develops autonomous robots to work on the moon, but the robots are insulted by Asimov's laws, which place their welfare third after humans and property. Annoyed, they rebel. And talking about holding grudges, they charge outrageous prices for cloning replacement organs for the aging human population back on Earth who just want to stay high. Bummer, man. By the way, it's a great introduction to a genetic algorithm approach to intelligence where the selection of the fittest attributes lead to the rapid evolution and adaptation. The Caves of Steel trilogy, Asimov's classic robot police procedurals. Yeah, technically there are 4 books, not 3 in the series, but Robots in Empire is just barely part of the series. It was added late in Asimov's career to bridge the early Robots work with this Foundation series. So, R. Daniel Olival is everything the maids and the helped hope for in their charges. He is kind, he is smart, he is important. Plus, he's a robot, so he's better than the human detective Elijah Bailey at pretty much everything. But they fortunately form an enduring Kirk-Spock odd couple as they solve murders on Earth and in space. The Caves of Steel presents robots as having justice circuits, obeying laws with machine literal-mindedness, similar to Dr. Ron Arkin's arguments that robot soldiers would be more ethical than emotional humans. The Naked Sun, Volume 2, that touches on telepresence as a way of life, and The Robots of Dawn involves sex bots, but for once it's a woman on the receiving end of robot lovin'. The 4th book, Robots in Empire, gives us Asimov's 0th law of robotics. So all 4 books are worth reading, but the first, The Caves of Steel, is a must-read for any robotist. Man, lock in, head on. One of my favorites. It's a great way to learn about telepresence, and you learn about it from a paralyzed FBI agent. So it's a near future where a virus has incapacitated 1% of the population, and they're nicknamed Haydens after the syndrome. So unable to move their bodies, their minds roam a Ready Player One cyberspace, but more interestingly, roam meat space through practical robot bodies. Well, it sounds like an opportunity for a major pity party and a sentimental journey, sort of surrogates with less attracted mediated embodiment. Yeah, no. This is Scalzi, and his characters roll with the punches and pop back with rapid-fire wit. For example, the robot bodies are called because they look like C-3PO. Instead of emotional hand-wringing, Scalzi has crafted 2 police procedurals where a Hayden FBI agent, Chris Shane, and his makes Mel Gibson and Lethal Weapon look dull and boring partner solve crimes that have a unique telerobotic twist. And because it's a Scalzi book, it's packed full of amusing situations and dry observation about life, video games, the realities of telecommuting, and corporate greed. You don't have to read the books in order, but it is more fun that way. And as a bonus for Ancillary Justice fans, see if you can tell if Chris is male or female, because Scalzi avoided making an explicit declaration. Playing along, Audible released 2 versions, one with a male narrator, Will Wheaton, and the other with a female narrator, Amber Benson. Despite being an avowed feminist, I recommend Wheaton. He narrates most of Scalzi's other books and captures that wry tone perfectly. He's errant to Scalzi's Moses. Who knew that Wesley Crusher was going to make good one day? So there's a 3rd police procedural that you may want to read. Well, it's sort of a police procedural. It's the Ray Electromatic series by Adam Christopher. It doesn't have any real science, but it's really fun. Ray Electromatic is a robot private detective in a sort of 1960s LA noir alternative history. Sounds like the Automatic Detective set in LA. But the big difference is that Ray, being a private dick, is actually a cover for the job that pays his electricity bills. He's really an assassin, since being a robot gives him that certain moral flexibility of John Cusack in Grosse Point Blank. The book is sometimes clever, sometimes rolling on the floor or funny, sometimes contradictory. The books in the series are like episodes of Futurama that were written by different people because the showrunner didn't check for consistency in Bender's character. But who cares? It's all good fun. The Murderbot Diaries. You've murdered time less productively, so start reading them now if you haven't. Martha Wells' The Murderbot Diaries is a series of novellas, each with a quick read of about 3 hours. The first, All Systems Red, won the 2017 Nebula. Artificial Condition did likewise. The tale is told from the viewpoint of a protagonist named Murderbot. He's not a serial killer, as the name would suggest, but he is transcendentally shallow and superficial. But Murderbot is comically not thinking what you'd expect a robot to be thinking. It openly hates interacting with humans, maintaining a snarky inner dialogue. So imagine David Spade as a bored robot mall guard. When Murderbot gains full autonomy through a bad software engineering patch, it doesn't try to go lead a robot uprising. It uses its freedom to surreptitiously spend its free time watching entertainment feeds and slacking off. But along with the wisecracking comedy, there's an opportunity to learn about software engineering and social influence. Social influence is how we subconsciously look for cues on what to do and how to react to new situations, like working with robots. And it can work both ways, just like the nerd boy in the X-Files episode, Jose Chung's from Outer Space. Well, I didn't spend all those years playing Dungeons and Dragons and not learn a little something about courage. Art, the asshole robot transport ship, yes, that's what ART stands for, learns about empathy from the entertainment feed, The Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon. Check out the RTSF interview with Martha. She's as fun as Murderbot. Now, a steampunk version of the robot uprising is in The Alchemy Wars. Ian Tregillis gives a far less plausible account of the robot uprising than Robopocalypse, one of my favorite books, being that robots were created with a dash of magic, hence the alchemy. But the robot's artificial amygdala parallels our biological brain structure and behavior-based programming styles. So despite the word alchemy, there's very little fantasy and a lot of science. Besides the biological metaphor, what sets the Alchemy Awards apart from other robot uprising books and movies is that it frames the uprising in terms of religion. The Dutch clockmakers created the robots during the Protestant Reformation, so in keeping with the Calvinist philosophy, they believe that robots have no free will, despite the need for a gesh to keep the robots enslaved. Catholics believe the robots have a soul and thus must be free. The book is more fun and action-packed than it sounds, and deeper than, say, the wacky cyberpunk Ware tetralogy. So, if you like Christian Avocera in The Expanse, then you will love the main human character, Berenice Charlotte de Mornay-Perigord, who gives Christian a run for the money as the most watch what I do next, foul-mouthed female character in science fiction ever. It's also the best encapsulation of robot ethics I've read. See the RTS interview with Ian? He's a nuclear physicist at Los Alamos and a really interesting guy. Robopocalypse Robogenesis is a scarily realistic look at the robot uprising. So the series is, at least in the first volume, a realistic and engaging tale of how robots could take over the world pretty much with existing technology. Daniel H. Wilson is a roboticist and inserts nice, thoughtful tidbits about the technology throughout. You know that pedestrian recognition software that's intended to help autonomous cars avoid people? Where it could be used to hit them. So, Robopocalypse and Robogenesis employ a similar narrative device of being presented as a historical record, similar to World War Z and the Themis Files. Robo-Apocalypse is a must-read, and it's the stronger of the two, far more plausible, far more focused on robots. Robot Genesis suffers a bit from zombie fatigue, introducing an unrealistic robot-induced zombieism, and it's more about political infighting among groups of humans. So definitely read Robot-Apocalypse if you haven't already. It's the most technically feasible version of the Robot Uprising. Robogenesis may not be your cup of tea. And there may be a TV series coming out. It's very cool. The Themis Files. It's a popular series and pretty much a case study in how not to do human-robot interaction or robot designs. So the Themis Files by Sylvain Neuvel is very similar to Pacific Rim, both in terms of robots and literary arcs. Remember how fun the first Pacific Rim movie was? With attractive, angsty actors piloting unnecessarily complex, giant piloted mecha to whoop ass on alien kaiju? Well, then the second movie, Pacific Rim Uprising, came out and was just blah. Bingo. Sleeping Giants, the first in the series, starts out great with the discovery of an implausible alien robot. Waking Gods keeps the momentum going by giving us a big reveal as to why the robot was left behind on Earth. And Only Human is the Pacific Rim Uprising, just blah, more of a preachy lecture on why can't we all get along than that robot-on-robot action we were hoping for. And like Pacific Rim, there's nothing particularly accurate about robots in the series. In fact, it's pretty much a study on how you wouldn't do robots and how you wouldn't do a user interface. So, free advice. Read the first book because it's fun and has a deliciously evil smoky man type of character. Maybe read the second book, but definitely skip the third. If you want to learn more about exoskeletons, you can read about them in the Science Robotics article or the RTSF podcast with Dr. Don Peterson. And speaking of not realistic robots, the Rex Nelio Adventure series does not even pretend to be realistic, but it's a galaxy of fun. The series is nominally about a charismatic, not too bright space con man, Rex Nelio, but the real star of this, Red Dwarf meets Doctor Who meets Hitchhiker's Guide, Human's Romp, is the narrator, the robot Sasha. Working for ethically challenged Rex puts her in interesting situations because she as a robot can't lie. Plus, instead of doing a Victorian swoon, Sasha shuts down for about 15 seconds and reboots whenever she's about to have an original thought. Just when the determined zaniness gets a bit tiresome, the author throws in a plot twist or a bon mot that will have you falling out of your chair. It's a fast, fun read. Okay, that's a lot of reading. If I had only one series to pick, I'd go with Murderbot with Lock-In Head-On as a close second. It's summer after all, and we deserve some fun. And if you want this summer some thought-provoking, think of the world differently, go with the Alchemy Wars over the Ware tetralogy, which gets a little too weird after the second novel. And if you haven't read Asimov's Caves of Steel trilogy, you really, really need to put that on your list. Robot-Apocalypse is one of the best robot books ever, and I recommend it, but I think of it as a standalone book. So that should give you some options for the summer. And remember to check out the Robotics Through Science Fiction website to learn more about the science in these works of fiction and to find other books and movies. And do subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel so you won't miss a thing.